So everybody's out there asking, what happens to Homelander in the comics? Does he live? Does he die? Does he ally himself with Billy Butcher and the boys and destroy Vought American? Here's the answer to your question. So let's take a step back for a second and let's talk about Compound V, Johann Vogelbaum, and a guy named Stormfront. Yes, in the comics, Stormfront is a guy, he's not a woman like you saw in the show. So the way this played out was that Compound V was created by Johann Vogelbaum for the German government during World War II. The idea was that Compound V would be used to create super soldiers for the German government to ensure they could win World War II. Over time, Vogelbaum started to realize incredibly fast that the Germans were going to lose. And so what happened is that Vogelbaum and Stormfront were extracted by Vought American. Who was Stormfront? Stormfront was the only survivor of the original Compound V experiments, but he was proof of concept. Compound V can work. And so when Vogelbaum and Stormfront were brought over to the States, Vought American started funding all of Vogelbaum's research under the idea that if Vought American can start creating super soldiers, they can hand them over to the government. That means infinite government weapons contracts forever. And so while Vogelbaum was working on Compound V and trying to find ways to perfect it and all that kind of stuff, that what they also did is they took some of the DNA of Stormfront and started trying to synthesize superheroes. Homelander is the first successful attempt at that. And that's why in the comics, the powers of Homelander and the powers of Stormfront are almost identical. And so for the first 18 years of his life, Homelander is literally raised in a bunker in South Dakota with a nuclear bomb present at all times. And that nuclear bomb was there for two reasons. The first was because if things went sideways, Vought American could detonate the bomb, they would kill Homelander, they could pass off the situation on whatever line of logic they wanted to use and start over again. The second reason why it was there was because Vought American didn't fully understand the powers of Homelander, that as he grew, his powers grew as well. And so once they did start to realize that a nuclear bomb wouldn't do anything to destroy him, what they did is they came up with a backup plan. That'll be important because that goes to the explanation of what happens to him in the comic books. And so eventually Homelander is released, quote unquote, by Vought American, and he's presented to the world as what you and I would describe as being Superman, essentially, right? Like an alien that crash landed on Earth, and he has all these powers that are fantastic, and he's there to lead humanity into a brighter future. And he kind of ushers in this era of the superhero, with the general public being none the wiser to the fact that they're all being created by Vought. But all these different superheroes start popping up all over the place. Some of them are brought onto the Seven, Queen Maeve, Black Noir, different things like that. And it's during this time that you start to see that there are two things going on with Homelander, that he's struggling with a kind of identity crisis, but that he is also a narcissist with sociopathic tendencies. He didn't really see people as people. And so this was shown in the comics in some similar ways that you see in the TV show. The most obvious example is Starlight, when she's brought on to the Seven. Now in the comics, Homelander was a part of that. But there's also the whole situation with Queen Maeve, that when you look at the show, Queen Maeve is disillusioned with Homelander because of the whole incident with the plane and the passengers dying and all that kind of stuff. In the comics, it was different, but similar at the same time. In the comics, that situation played out as a way to show that superheroes were just not as effective as people thought they were. And they certainly weren't capable of being the kind of superheroes that we would expect, right? Like grabbing the plane and landing it down safely and all the passengers come down the chutes and all that kind of stuff. It was just designed to show that they were inept. Queen Maeve's disillusionment with Homelander actually came by way of a pretty sadistic trick that he played on her. That what he did is that when she was brought onto the team, she was infatuated with him. And so he basically brings her down to a room, promising her that the two of them are going to start touching naughty bits. He blindfolds her, then he replaces himself with Black Noir. Then he starts taking pictures of her and Black Noir together. Then he circulates the pictures around. And so that just kind of destroyed her confidence and it destroyed her perception of him. Of course, it killed the relationship, but there was all the embarrassment that came along with it. Those things and others came together to create the Queen Maeve that you know in the show at the very beginning in season 1, where she's basically an alcoholic, she's detached, she doesn't really care about anything, she's just there. as a character. But the other ways in which this kind of narcissism and these sociopathic tendencies really manifest are like how he treats other members of the Seven, that there is this idea that he cares more about money than anything else. There's actually a scene in the comic, I don't remember if it's in the show, where I think he tells like A-Train or the Deep or one of these guys, don't mess with the money, right? So he's very much raised by Vought American to believe that he functions because they allow him to. But over time, specifically after his encounter with the boys, all that starts to change, because once he is provided evidence by the boys of what his real origin is, that he was effectively engineered, that he is not this guy who is an alien or he doesn't have any kind of an interesting story or anything like that, that he kind of starts to go nuts and he starts to lose faith in Vought American. Then he starts to think about, why are we even doing what people tell us to in the first place? We can do anything. We're superheroes. They can't stop us. They've tricked us into believing they can stop us, but the reality is that they can't. And so the direction the show is moving in seems to be the direction of what was happening in the overall story arc, which is to say, what happens is Homelander starts uniting all these different superheroes across the world and then tells them, like, we can overthrow the US government. We can destroy the military. We can do whatever we want to do. And so they basically orchestrate a coup d'etat. That leads to the boys intervening. Now, what ended up also happening here is that the US government had always been prepared for what would happen if superheroes went rogue. Because while Vought American was always trying to secure weapons contracts, the reality is the government never really trusted superheroes. They never really believed that superheroes could be effective for a variety of instances, right? The whole 9/11 plane incident, different things like that. And so what goes on is Homelander finally makes his move. And in fact, he invades the White House and takes out the vice president and even the president, kills everybody, right? Like takes them all over. And that's when you end up finding out what's actually going on here. That when Vought American came to the realization that Homelander couldn't be killed with conventional weapons, they cloned him. In fact, they used the DNA of Stormfront to create another version of Homelander, but one that was more powerful. That was Black Noir. And the idea was that Black Noir would basically just keep an eye on Homelander, and if things ever went sideways, that Black Noir would kill Homelander, and then he would replace Homelander, so nobody in the general public would be aware of the fact that Homelander was dead and gone. Because of the fact that Homelander never did anything crazy that led to Vought American giving Black Noir the okay to kill him, Black Noir basically started going crazy, that what he started doing was actually engaging in a series of actions dressed as Homelander in order to kind of try to force the hand of Vought American to tell him to kill Homelander. But that never happened. And the biggest reason for that is because a lot of these incidences of what it appeared to be Homelander engaging in, they were swept under the rug by Vought American because Homelander was a cash cow. He made so much money. And so it was just easier to make it go away than to kill him, because they didn't really know what Black Noir was going to do when he took the place of Homelander. And so over time, things like Billy Butcher's wife being assaulted, that was actually Black Noir. It was never really Homelander. And so by the end, you realize Homelander, while he was a pretty screwed up person, was not nearly as bad as people thought he was. All these instances of like cannibalism and things like that, it was all Black Noir doing it. Once this exposition comes, right, this explanation comes to Homelander, he actually attacks Black Noir. But because Black Noir is more powerful than he is, Black Noir kills Homelander. He literally rips his head off, tears his body apart. And then ultimately Billy Butcher and those guys track down Black Noir and they kill him. So the answer to your question is that at the end of The Boys, yes, Homelander dies, but not before learning that he was supposed to be killed and replaced by Black Noir, as well as overthrowing the entirety of the United States government and basically destroying all powers of leadership. So that whole exposition he had with Starlight, where he said he'd go after the nerve centers and all that kind of stuff, he does. It's pretty wild. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. If you guys want to know what happens to the other characters, let me know down in the comments, and I will catch you all later. Peace.